The 14th year of Chenghua. Extra chapters. A gentleman of extras that hasn't yet expressed himself fully. Chapter 167. The Crown Prince. Everyone knew that the Crown Prince was a trouble-making little lordling. Even the Emperor had to admit that much. Presumably due to his own harsh experiences as a child, the Emperor cherished his son like a priceless treasure and never wanting him to suffer the slightest bit of wrong. On top of that, the Crown Prince was not only his eldest legitimate son but he was his only child. With increasing hopes placed onto his shoulders, the prince received increasingly higher expectations, causing him to practically grow up under the attention of the crowd. Due to sparseness of royal descendants, the officials had been anxious at the very start, urging the emperor to sprout more branches for the sake of the great Ming's reputation. The emperor generally wouldn't argue with his officials, yet he never gave in one con over this matter. The cabinet had no stance on this matter, either. Only a few censors shouted most viciously about it, but over time, everyone quieted down over this issue and no longer held any expectation for the emperor to have more sons and focused their attention on raising up the crown prince. However, the prince's personality was completely different from his father and his grandfather. In other words, his personality was more on par with that of a normal child, lively, active, filled with curiosity and wanted to try everything. To an ordinary family, that personality would be nothing of note, but the issue here was that he was the crown prince, the heir apparent, the future leader. At the same time that he enjoyed the pinnacle of glory and wealth, he was placed under all sorts of restrictions. Ever since the Tumu stronghold crisis, all the officials had been mentally exhausted by how Yingzhong kept blabbing about how all emperors should be like the present emperor, sitting quietly since his ascension, governing as they ought to be doing and not adding to their subjects' stress. But this crown prince was destined to be an exception. With them being different people with different childhood upbringing and different personalities, how could the hopes placed on the emperor limit the prince? When things reached the peak, things could only go downhill from there. If he was viciously forced, that would likely only make the crown prince grow rebellious and fight against his subjects in everything. While all the court officials were still immersed in the pretty dream of how to educate the crown prince, Tang Fan had already foreseen this issue. Because he was the head of the cabinet, he also held the position of an East Palace tutor, but in reality, he had so much work that he really didn't have much time to teach the crown prince. For someone that loved to be active and found it hard to calmly sit down and study from scriptures, making him sit there and recite the 4 books and 5 classics, or teach him about the sages of ancient times was clearly not going to work. Alas, the East Palace's education method had set procedures and norms. Although Confucius had said that lessons should conform to the student, if someone actually brought the crown prince out of the palace to play, they would probably be denounced and forced to resign the very next day. Even as the head of the cabinet, Tang Fan would find it very hard to escape blame from such thing. One good emperor was enough to influence the atmosphere of the whole era. Tang Fan knew that well, so in spite of his busy schedule, he still tried to find the time as much as he could to provide guidance to the crown prince. In turn, the prince seemed to find him to be very different from his other teachers. For that reason, every time he attended Tang Fan's lessons, he could concentrate a little better than with others and was willing to listen to him more in earnest. Later on, to his gradual surprise, the crown prince learned that teacher Tang was very accepting of pretty much anything. For example, after he had learned of the emperor sneaking the crown prince out of the palace, he didn't admonish them like the others, nor did he say anything about it. In fact, he had perhaps intentionally mentioned the locations of sideshows and slums in the capital. The prince had been confused at the beginning and later questioned his father about it. Only then did he learn of the particular difficulties that Tang Fan had faced. As the head of the cabinet, he could not publicly agree to the excursion of the emperor and the crowned prince outside of the palace. That would be tantamount to him going against every official there was, as well as not conforming to civilians' expectation. Deep in his mind though, he felt that the future emperor shouldn't be stuck deep within the palace. Only by seeing and experiencing more could his nature be further tempered. On account of his own difficult childhood, the current emperor was not ignorant despite growing up deep within the palace. Meanwhile, the current crown prince's life had gone smoothly since his birth. He had parents who were unusually affectionate towards each other, and he was much less likely to experience palace intrigues. That's why, he needed to be exposed to the outside world. Your teacher Tang is different from most people. He will never use the viewpoint of a pedant to demand anything of you, he said to the prince with a smile. Not only should you not be of a mind to defy him, but you should try to learn as much as you can from him. When he was a youngster, he traveled across the land and has seen more bridges than grains of salt you've ever eaten. The crown prince would have loved to always play. If he weren't the crown prince, he would have really loved to run around and have fun all across the realm. Thus, when he heard his father said that, his eyes lit up. Really? The head of the cabinet had traveled the great Ming. The emperor nodded. Of course. If you do well in your classes from now on, we will have the head of the cabinet tell you some good stories during a lull in your studies. It will surely broaden your horizons. Having a son like this, the relationship between them was closer and more casual than that of the normal citizens. Upon hearing that, the crown prince tried to haggle with his father. How about half a shishan of lessons, half a shishan of stories? The emperor was both annoyed and amused, giving him a bop on the head. What half a shishan of lessons, half a shishan of stories? The head of the cabinet takes time out of his busy schedule to give you those lessons. Do you think that everyone was just assigned to the East Palace to revolve around you every period of the day? The 10-year-old prince pouted and said, Father Emperor can appoint him to just teach me, then have someone else run the government. That won't do. We may be valued as the highest authority, but we can't just do anything we want, the emperor answered casually. The crown prince huffed and said, I see. You're scared of him. This little man knowing how to use instigating mental tactics like this made the emperor unsure of how to react, but he definitely didn't fall for it. Instead, he nodded his head and said, You're right. We do have a lot of respect for the head of the cabinet. If a person is virtuous and honorable, they are worthy of others' admiration. Recalling out earlier days, we almost weren't able to keep our position of crowned prince were it not for the protection and care of the people like the head of the cabinet. Without them, we would have long gone from this world, with your existence out of the question. That's why you need to remember that genuinely capable subjects must be treated with respect and are never to be treated irreverently. These people are the support pillar of our nation. The great Ming's stability relies not only on the emperor but also on such officials. The boy nodded, only half comprehending and a bit distressed at heart. They had clearly been talking about fun things, right? Why had Father Emperor turned all serious all of a sudden? End chapter. The 14th year of Chenghua. Extra chapters. A gentleman of extras that hasn't yet expressed himself fully. Chapter 168. Education. The little crown prince was unusually inquisitive. Whenever he felt something to be novel, he would want to go and take a look, and if he could try it out for himself, that would be even better. If anyone tell him that it wasn't fun, not only would he not believe them, but he would want to try it out himself the more. For example, in the winter time, he had insisted upon skating and jumping on a lake coated over with ice. His attendants had been terrified, each of them telling him that he would fall into the icy water and catch a cold, but that only made him want to do it more. In the end, he had stepped on a thin portion of ice which had then collapsed, submerging the lower half of his body. His pants, shoes, and socks had all been soaked, scaring everyone's souls out of their bodies. Fortunately, he had been caught in time, and that tiny child had not completely sunk into the water. Had he caught a bad cold, whether he could recover or not at his age would be hard to say. After that incident, the emperor had come to realize just how much of a trouble his son was. It gave him a severe headache. Reprimanding him would be useless. That was aside from the fact that he really didn't like to heavily scold his son, as even if he did, the child was lively by nature. What came in his left ear would go out of his right ear, never to be taken to heart. He was young at this time, which limited the misdeeds that he could commit, but once he grew up, no one would be able to control him. Since he would go to play in icy water during winter now, would he go into the sea to hunt dragons when he grew up? Having the teachers educate him would be useless, too. He knew his son better than anyone else. The boy was quite bright, had a near infallible memory, and could clearly recite his teacher's lessons in benevolence, righteousness, and history, but whether he took those lessons seriously and keep them at heart could not be said. In the young prince's eyes, the world was filled with novelty, with far too many things that he could have fun with. Every spot of land was amusing, as well as every birds and beast, and the people were even more amusing. Despite his extreme intelligence, he didn't work industriously, and yet his appraisal and thoughts on human nature caused the emperor, as a father, endless surprise every time. However, in the prince's eyes, playing around with people's heart was just a joke, nothing serious. With such a character, would he be able to bear the responsibility of handling the realm in the future? Thinking about how reliable his own father had been and how unreliable his son was being, the beyond reliable emperor felt trepidation. With no other choice, he could only ask the people by his side on how they could correct the crown prince's character. Huayan was long dead, otherwise with his personality, he could have followed the prince every day to supplement his education. That would have been more than perfect, as Huayan had never been as pedantic as most officials even after servicing in the palace for so many years. Him looking after the crown prince would have been a cinch. What a shame it was that there was only one Huayan in this world, and Wang Zhi had already gone off to Ningbo, more or less disappeared into the ocean at this point. The rest of the people serving in the palace were very loyal, but their wisdom was not exactly high, giving the emperor misgivings about trusting them with this. After pondering things, he could only find Tang Fan to ask for his advice. Tan Fan was quite busy. Since Lu Jian had retired, he had been promoted to head of the cabinet. He was an East Palace tutor for the crown prince on top of that, too. It was for this reason that Sui Zhou had entered the palace several times to give him support both openly and in secret, his implication being for the emperor not to give Tang Fan too heavy of a burden. The emperor himself wasn't sure how to reach to that. If at all possible, he really didn't want to bother Tang Fan with things such as this, but the emperor found that educating his son was even more trying than running the country. One person's plans would fall short while those of a pair could grow long. In the end, after all the twists and turns, he still ended up discussing things with Tang Fan. The latter was a bit vexed after hearing all of this. The crown prince's personality was indeed worrying. If he was an ordinary person, his fun-loving nature would be just fine, and even if he played himself to death, that would just be his own business. However, he was the future ruler of the country. If he kept playing around, it would be the nation that would get played to death. Not only the nation, but playing with fate would be costly, too. The current emperor had only one son right now, so if the crown prince didn't live long enough to leave a son in the future. No, stop it. Those thoughts that flashed through Tang Fan's mind was much too terrifying. Even though the possibility was small, there was no guarantee that this would not happen. As a normal person, it would be alright to just pay attention to the present moment, but as the head of the cabinet of the great Ming, Tang Fan had to plan for the future, even for 100 years from now. He had the responsibility to do all that he could to eradicate unexpected circumstances. However, leading the crown prince down the proper path was indeed a very headache-inducing issue. He shared a look with the emperor, and they unwittingly sighed in unison. Pitiful were the hearts of this world's parents. Blindly admonishing him and stopping him definitely wouldn't do anything. Many officials might vote to do exactly that, but Tang Fan knew well that such action wouldn't work. Who had never been young before? Everyone had experienced the prince's same childish behavior before, though they might not have had his particular degree of activeness, of course. At this age where one's character had yet to completely settled, if the young one wanted to do something, there would be someone nearby willing to nag them about what they could do and couldn't do. If they did this with the crown prince, not only would he not stop but instead he would be of mind of since you tell me not to do it, the more that I want to do it. Tang Fan deliberated carefully then said, letting the water flow is better than damming it up. Since His Highness has an innate love for play, forcibly suppressing it would only produce the opposite result. You may as well let him go and play until he's satisfied. The emperor blinked and said, what are you trying to say? Thinking to himself that even the kind emperor had times of being cunning, Tang Fan didn't answer right away and simply smile. This subject's idea is the same as that of your majesty. The emperor coughed and was forced to say, isn't Wang Ji in Ningbo? We want him to bring the crown prince around for a tour. Perhaps after seeing the world, the boy will curb his playful nature. The rest of his words went unsaid. Tang Fan appropriately understood. The crown prince going out of the palace is a major issue, to say of going to sail the seas. The officials will definitely oppose it strongly. Please think it thoroughly, Your Majesty. The emperor knew this of course. When he had gone out of the palace just to pray at a temple which was just within the capital, all of the society had opposed it. All officials wished that they could confine the emperor inside the palace, that it was best for him to never take a step out of it for the rest of his life, yet they also demanded that he be adept in accepting advice, have respect for virtuous folks and work hard in governance. That was just too much expectations. The emperor was just human, not a puppet. An emperor that had never seen the world before would either be meek or incompetent, or spectacularly rebellious, or negligent in governance. The fourth option would be difficult. Just how many lifetimes of incense had they needed to burn to get the current emperor who perfectly met what the nation needs? Were this another emperor, he would never have allowed his subjects to make arrangements like this. The present crown prince went without saying. Due to his childhood experiences, the emperor had never been hale. He was quite worried that he would abruptly leave this mortal world, leaving behind the crown prince who was not yet ready, turning a good situation into a total mess. For that reason, he always held an intense sense of crisis. If Tang Fan was anybody else, once they heard that the emperor wanted to let the crown prince explore outside the palace, they would probably leap 3 chi into the air and tearfully object to the idea. Seeing that Tang Fan was not strongly opposing it and merely pointing out possible consequences, the emperor calmed down somewhat. It is not that we aren't aware of what you speak of, head of the cabinet Tang. With how unruly the crown prince is by nature, if it isn't tampered, I fear that a huge disaster will come in the future. You speak of the truth, but this matter should be considered at length. When the prince leaves the palace, will the realm be informed? Of course not, the emperor said automatically. Will the court officials be informed? It will be best not to do that, else he will never be able to leave. In that case, he should go incognito. That's right. We don't wish him to reveal his identity, so he should change his name when he leaves with Wang Ji. Wang Ji's loyalty is unquestionable, but his capabilities as a single man is limited and the dangers of the outside world is beyond predictions. Have you thought about the possible incidents that the crown prince might come across, Your Majesty? We have. If possible, we would never want our beloved son to go far away. However, thinking back to the days of old, the great ancestor beat down a country with one fist. Yongle ousted the Tartars while Jianwen grew up deep in the palace where he was isolated with limited knowledge of strategies and ended up burned to death. The ancient saying of, "Be born in hard time and you will die in peace," was clearly born of wisdom. The prince is our son, the heir apparent, and we dare not hope that he can compare to Yongle, but if he could at least not be like Jianwen, then we would be fully satisfied. Tang Fan was thrilled. The prince was an only son. It was reasonable to say that the emperor cherished him like a treasure, yet he was willing to look off into the distance. Saying something like that displayed how deep of a thinker he was. "You are wise, your majesty." The emperor sighed. "Still, he is young. If he is rashly allowed to go out, the empress will not allow it, nor would she be assured. In your opinion, should we send some bodyguards with him, just in case?" Tang Fan nodded and said, "That goes without saying. His Highness is precious, so even if he needed to go out to temper himself, his safety needs to be assured. Apart from that, do you have any other suggestions?" "I do." The emperor's eyes shone as he urged, "Come, say them. You should have more ears." Seeing that he was speechless, Tang Fan held a smile. "This subject will not mince words. If the crown prince has a little brother, he will understand the principle behind setting an example as an older brother. This would also ensure the purity of the imperial lineage. It does more than one thing in one go, so to speak. This subject knows that your majesty and the empress share deep feelings, and I have no desire to be an unromantic villain, but you are in the prime of your life. You will definitely be able to have children and grandchildren running about your knees in the future, so, please put more effort into it." The emperor's face went dark and twitchy. He glared at Tang Fan and was speechless for a long while. The advantage of having a head of the cabinet who was unconventional was that he wouldn't have to listen to pedantic advice, and he could easily trust him when it came to major things. Like right at the moment, for instance, there was likely no one in the entire court who would agree to let the crown prince leave the capital, yet Tang Fan did, being someone that the emperor could consult with in any matter. The disadvantage though was that the same head of the cabinet would occasionally said such unbridled statements straight to his face, and he couldn't actually find fault in them. Put more effort into it? Was this something that could actually be done with simply exerting effort? Forget it, he could bear with this sort of advantages and disadvantages. Who made him be the emperor, anyways? To be an emperor, one needed to be able to stomach much more than a prime minister could. If the prime minister could swallow down a boat, then the emperor should be able to at least bear having Mount Tai sitting steadily in his gut. End chapter. The 14th year of Chenghua. Extra chapters. A gentleman of extras that hasn't yet expressed himself fully. Chapter 169. Sui Zhou. The character Zhou came from Chuan, a place to live in the middle of water known as an islet. His courtesy name was given to him by the late emperor. Guangchuan, many rivers, the meaning of it being that all rivers merged back into the ocean. He had been given it in the hopes that he would have an open mind when he looked at the world. Disregarding the late emperor's mediocre governance, he had been regarded as the paragon of a generation in terms of artistic attainments. Sui Zhou was no great with that kind of thing, but he still came to know of a circle of harmony which the late emperor painted himself. In the opinions of many, the late emperor might not have accomplished anything because the court he inherited from his father was in shambles. As time went on, he had grown impatient with the extra constraints placed on emperor and thereafter started slacking off. And yet, ironically, the only father-like affection that Sui Zhou had ever experienced had come from the late emperor. His bond with his birth parents had been shallow since his childhood. He had two siblings. His older brother, Suian, was his parents' favorite, and even though the youngest was a woman, as a little sister, she had received some extra attention. Sui Zhou alone, who was in the middle, was disposable. It could be that because his mother nearly died while giving birth to him, she didn't have any particular fondness for him. It didn't bother him much though. He had been independent ever since he was little. Even if no one cared for him, he could live a good life by himself. Whether his parents cherished him or not would just be additional flowers on a bouquet. At the age of 8, when his older brother was being spoiled rotten by their parents, Sui Zhou had already left home to go study martial arts at Wuodang. After Yang'il's time, Wuodang had become famous, its mountain turning into a national center for martial arts. Sui Zhou had studied under the sect for 12 full years, training in the coldest days of winter and in the hottest periods of the summer. That's how he got so proficient in all forms of martial arts. He has a calm and collected nature. He wasn't fond of talking, but if he claimed that he would fulfill something, it would certainly be done. The late emperor as well as the then Empress Dowager Zhou had both been very fond of him. That was to say, that apart from his parents, none of his elders ever disliked Suizhou. The late emperor had treated him like a favored nephew. Once he had seen that he was interested in joining the army, he had given him a long talk, then finally set him up in the Jinyue so he could look after him from nearby. In contrast, his brother had been obsessed with earning scholarly honors. Seeing that he had become a Jinyue, he was worried that Suizhou's status would ruin his own reputation and cause him setbacks in his career, to the point that he had urged Suizhou through their parents in the hopes that he would give up him position in the Jinyue. Suizhou hadn't listened to them, of course. For minor things, he wouldn't bother to bicker with them because he didn't care, but for things he genuinely cared about, he would never let them go. Seeing that he refused to obey, his older brother had grown furious. The brothers had a fight, though it had mostly been Suiyan shouting and Suizhou occasionally answering with a sentence or two. It wasn't that Suizhou was bad at fights. He would only have to draw out his saber and put it against his brother's neck to stop him from arguing, but if the brothers got to this point, what would be the meaning in it? Later on, their parents noticed the commotion and rush over to mediate between them. Suizhou had heard their persuasion, which was mainly composed of words that basically said the being a Jinyue was no good and that he should resign. He hadn't refuted them to their faces, but a few days later, he had simply said his farewells to his parent, moved out of the Sui residence and gone to live by himself. He had always been reserved and would rather act than talk. Others only believed that he was embracing the title of consortkin and slandered him behind his back, but none of them thought that he would quietly establish his very own achievements. Relying on his actual skills, he had quickly gained a steady foothold in the Jinyue. By that time that those held jealousy in their hearts and was waiting to gloat came back to their senses, they had found that he was already pressing down on top of their heads. The Jinyue seemed impressive, but in reality, it had to deal with a lot of senseless things. As the emperor's personal guards, it was naturally inseparable from trifles and dark palace intrigues. No matter if the case is odd or dangerous, the Jinyue would always be on it. Suizhou had once drafted a plan for himself. At around the age of 27, he would take a wife and have children. Then at age 30, he would assume the position of commanding officer of the Jinyue. The commanding office at that time was Wantong, a full-blood little bother of consort Wan, but he would have to retire eventually. When the time came, in terms of seniority and skills, he should be the only one next in line. Within all those calculations, he had only overlooked one matter. He hadn't known that he would came across Tang Fan. When he had first seen the man, he felt that meeting him was definitely inferior to just hearing about him. He didn't look anything special, a typical civil official who couldn't do any heavy lifting, who relied solely on being a good talker and was no different from the rest of the court officials. Suizhou's impression of him had not been any sort of good. He hadn't expected that the other would be very disciplined and wouldn't be discouraged no matter how many stumbling blocks was thrown his way. He would talk to him as if they were old friends whenever they met. Regardless of whether he had genuinely not minded him making things difficult for him or had he only pretended to be magnanimous, that display of how much he could stomach was enough to prove that he was out of the ordinary and someone who might be capable of serving as a minister in the future. "What got you so distracted?" A voice suddenly come to his ears, interrupting his recollections. He turned his head to see that Tang Fan had already returned from the palace at some unknown point in time. He had already changed from regular clothes. He was even holding a book in his hand. "It's a rest day, but His Majesty suddenly called you into the palace. What was it about?" Suizhou asked. "Nothing much. It was only something to do with the crown prince. Yesterday, he was up to his tricks again and went into the palace of manifest virtue to pretend to be a ghost and scare everyone. This event has prompted His Majesty to make up his mind to send him off to Wangji." Tang Fan shook his head, smiling bitterly. I thought I was pretty mischievous as a child, but I never reached the prince's level. The new really does surpass the old. The palace of manifest virtue had been Consort Wan's quarters when she was alive. After her death, it had been sealed up for the time being since no one was living in it. The crown prince ran over there because he heard of some rumors which gave him the idea to pretend to be a ghost. In the end, before he could have his fun, his father had instead bristle up. Speaking to that point, Tang Fan curiously brought back the previous topic. Huang Chuan, you rarely get distracted? Does a problem come up? The corner of Sui Zhou's mouth ticked up slightly. It's nothing really. I was just remembering the past and the time when I first met you. Tang Fan had to smile at that, too. Yes, I remember that. You were making things a lot harder for me at that time. If I had been someone with a little less patience, I would have gotten angry and run off. Tell me, where else would you have gotten a partner as wise and courageous as me? Sui Zhou took his hand and said in earnest, in this life, even though I missed many people and missed out on many things, I'm extremely blessed that I didn't end up missing you. Finish.